the world moves forward at an exponential pace. We are impartial arbiters of knowledge. We are the navigators of disruption. We link our known to your unknown. We anticipate what it will take to thrive. Protecting your potential for growth in an exponential world. We are the trusted advisor.
Well, welcome everybody. This is another series here on The Grind. And for anybody that's new, why do we call it The Grind? Because business is a grind, and we have a good conversation about 20 minutes long with different participants while we have a cup of coffee. So that's where the grind comes from. Today, we're going to be talking about the value of EMS, an energy management system. So it's really the next generation of a building management system, and we'll dive in deeper around that. And the big key takeaway from this before we jump in is we really can lower your operating costs, improve efficiency while positively impacting the planet and helping you with your sustainability journey. So what, who, and how are the different components that go into that an initiative or your journey, right? It's really any kind of multi-location solution that, or even a large campus area that has HVAC units associated with it. You know, it could be retail, restaurants, manufacturing, so on and so forth down the list. And there's several different things that we can do around electricity, water, and natural gas to help our clients. And today we're going to be speaking specifically on EMS, energy management system, which that's tied into the Internet of Things that you might have heard of at some point in conversation. So what are we talking about then when it comes to your journey or being able to implement a sustainability program, right? You have to measure, manage, offset, report, and optimize. That's the constant evolution of your program. Today, we're going to dive into the manage aspect of it again as it relates to EMS. So I'm going to welcome to the call here today Jordan Statt from In Touch, and he's going to be in the hot seat today on The Grind and give us some good insights around EMS.
Thanks, John.
So Jordan, before we dive into the visual and get into some different questions, just tell us a little bit about yourself and In Touch and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with myself. I'm the VP of Channel Development here at In Touch, and my primary responsibility is to work with external partners who have customers that are in need of an EMS solution like ours, in an effort to really grow this need in the marketplace. As far as In Touch goes, In Touch, probably the best way to sum it up is, we're ultimately the market leader in the multi-site facility energy management space. What that means is multi-site facilities. You touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but really any operator that has a distributed portfolio of locations that needs to centrally manage and monitor their energy consumption at those sites. And
they can do it all without manually going from control to control and things like that, which I'm sure we'll dive into as well.
They can.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So how does with an EMS solution, so energy management system, how does it differ from the traditional building management system, or what you see customers ultimately using today to manage their utilities and energy systems?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that there's a misnomer that EMS and BMS are functionally the same thing, right? The way that
Mm-hmm.
we certainly look at it here at NTouch. Building management systems are very macro focused on allowing for control and potentially optimization of certain business functions inside of a facility. EMS, I think, is complementary to that concept, but is much more focused on efficiency and reduction of energy, and then ultimately sustainability of the portfolio of sites at the customer level, right? And if you think about it, it's almost like the ability to control and optimize is really only half the battle, right? There's this entire other side of managing a space and optimizing a space that requires some level of human input, but also requires the latest and greatest in technology to help drive those efficiencies. And the latter is really what we're doing here at NTouch.
Okay, great. The slide up on the screen, if you can, just kind of talk us through those different components and what you're doing with your system, and how, as you mentioned, from the cloud is a centralized control point. Plus, there's additional support and services, managed services that you specifically do that can bring the knowledge to the customer. And as you go through that, if you don't mind, just touch on, why does this really matter to the customer?
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's a lot in that specific question, but we'll starting with the actual diagram you see here. I think this gives a very good high level overview to someone who might not understand fully what we're actually doing inside of a space to drive an energy reduction, right? So starting with the central entry point that we have into a space is HVAC control, right? So if there are packaged rooftop units on top of the building, that is generally where we will go into a space and put in our central thermostat controller. That control device obviously gives us the ability to remotely operate and manage the HVAC units, and optimize the efficiency of those HVAC units. But it also acts as we'll call it a data collection hub in this case, where other things that we're putting into the space, like energy meters inside of the energy panel, things like water monitors or lighting controls. There's a lot of different touch points inside of a facility that ultimately relate to how much energy is being used in that facility. So the more data that we can connect and run through our control solution, we can pull up into our cloud and then allow for ultimately remote management, optimization, and do things like increase asset performance, extend asset life, and that's just on the hardware side, right? The hardware and software
Mm-hmm.
side. What we found in our journey as an EMS provider is that giving the customer the controls and the software capability is great, but there's a whole other component of actually managing these spaces that
Right.
was really a big need. And so we have a managed service component of our product that we call NTouch 360 that effectively helps us make sure that the savings potential we see inside of a customer portfolio is actually realized.
Oh, excellent. So you're going to be tracking, what their initial state was all the way through to ongoing and, over time, so that you can justify the ROI. And I think that kind of brings us into, why is it important to the customer a little bit around it. Definitely there's a financial benefit to having this in place. But more importantly, I think operationally, and you can attest to this better, is that the efficiency that's gained and the knowledge point that's gained through the data collection really changes how the environment is being operated or controlled. Because it's not just smart thermostats like we have on our wall at home and we program it from 6 to 6 at whatever temperature to the next. You guys are actually taking the analytics and are able to make decisions off of how these things run and when, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And again, when we look at the need for the managed service component inside of an EMS solution, what we found is that the local operating environment is changing all the time, right? Hours of operation change, environmental conditions change. There's things that are happening, across a portfolio that
Hmm.
for, one person at the customer or at the business to manage is very challenging. And, again, we try to fill that gap to make sure that, your environment is operating as efficiently and most optimized as possible, because that's ultimately what drives, continued savings and sustainability goals, right? It's easy to put controls into a space and then see an immediate, decrease in consumption. But over time, the tendency of a location, especially portfolios of locations, is to creep back towards their normal consumption rate. And it's because they don't have a partner in that success with them. And again, what we really try to do is specialize in partnering and educating the customer so that,
Hmm.
you're operating at the most optimal state.
And with that in place, what comes to mind for me as a really key point that I just don't think I can stress enough is the scalability. With an EMS solution, you can manage at scale, right? You're not going to have a physical person at every single location and staff to that, which is most likely cost prohibitive for most organizations to have somebody 24/7, right? Maybe you have somebody however many hours a day, but with this in place, you get the visibility and control 24/7, and you have a supporting uh, operations center that can take action based on, the what we call a run book with the customer to know what should be done under a circumstance. So huge value there, I think, for scalability into um, generating those ongoing operating savings and utility savings, which at the end of the day, if you're using less energy because you're more uh, knowledgeable on when and how you're going to use it, you're going to reduce the number of kilowatts you're using, which is ultimately going to then reduce your carbon footprint.
Yep, that's absolutely right. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I definitely learned it from you, so I'm stealing your thunder a bit there. Um, some of the things that we see with IoT are challenges. You see it in uh, various news, right, around LinkedIn or on the news itself with cybersecurity and IoT. There's some actual government entities that have had hacking happen because their IoT equipment associated with um, whatever they're doing was vulnerable because it wasn't securely protected and or separate to their operations and actual real corporate network. And that's something that we see and can assist customers with at Cirrustel is designing and optimizing and getting the right connectivity, whether it's, cable circuits, cellular, you name it, satellite, whatever it may be in the terminating gear. So when it comes to the implementation of this and the ongoing utilization of an EMS system, what are the challenges that you see in the marketplace that you're solving for?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you certainly touched on one of the ones that we see. To be honest, with almost every deployment that we have, right, is this network security issue. I think for in very practical terms, how reliable is the hardware that's being installed, right? I think there's this notion, certainly that everything should operate like an iPad, right? You put it on a local network and it's easy. And for consumer grade type of products, that certainly is the case. But when we're running things like mission critical HVAC units in order to keep a store open, there's a lot more reliability that needs to be brought into the scope there. And so one of the things that we do at EnTouch when managing the implementation, one is determining how the customer wants us to operate on their network, how they want to actually roll out sites, right? A good EMS solution provider should not require you to have the store closed during implementation, right? Obviously,
That's
what.
huge. I'm sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you, but that's huge, right? Because you're eliminating downtime, lost profits, lost operational. If you're a manufacturer, right, you're not producing the widgets. So that's huge that you guys can deploy a solution and not take down a site.
yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, it's we often get a surprise reaction at that when customers, their assumption is, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to down 80% of my store fleet for a period of time. And again, I think that's a scary prospect. The other thing that I think is often a little bit daunting for a multi-site facility customer is, how am I as the customer going to manage this rollout, right? And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we at EnTouch are really, really specialized in is rapid and scalable, but also high quality deployment of the solution, right? I think there's an assumption too that all we're putting on the wall is a thermostat unit to control the HVAC, which isn't the case, right? There's other components in there that, if we're inside of the electrical panel, if we're putting in sensors into refrigeration units, I mean, there's things that, when you get that work done, you want it to be done at a very high quality level so that there aren't repeat visits needed, and so that the data being generated by those locations is accurate from the moment of installation. And again, that is one of the things that we specialize in when we do a deployment.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think what expands on that, or just to stress it a little bit more, is that that's implementation. Now, day two, what happens day two? You get running this, you're optimizing it. This gets back to your EnTouch 360 solution where it's managed, and that includes the support for the devices itself. So can you talk a little bit about that aspect of if there's a hardware um, change, or update, or something happens, it gets damaged, whatever, it needs to be replaced. Who handles that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and obviously, very important to many of the customers, right? If you're going to have a capital expenditure to put a solution like this in, understanding and trusting that the equipment will work day one the same way that will work day, 365 is important. And one of the things that we offer when we deploy directly to customers is effectively a lifetime warranty for as long as you're a customer on the equipment that we put in. And again, the reason being,
You said lifetime warranty on the equipment?
yeah, as long as you're a customer of ours, you will
Right.
receive a warranty on the equipment, right?
Wow, that's huge. Okay.
Yeah, as long as you're a managed service customer, I should say,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah, the
and
the EnTouch 360 that I mentioned.
exactly. And
Okay.
again, the reason being is that, when we look at the totality of what we're doing, as long as we're partnered with the customer and managing this service for them, we can really ensure that we're driving the savings. And so, for us to make sure that we're capable of doing that, obviously the hardware on site has to be working and functional at all times. But I think it's certainly a warm blanket for the customer to know that not only do I have this partner who's helping me optimize, my operations, but they're also ensuring that the equipment that is, meant to help do that is always up to speed. The other thing that we do, that I think I didn't talk about before is, not only are we managing this, at a day-to-day level, but we will review quarterly with the customer their performance and their energy reduction, right? And the goal of that is to make sure that, while we're helping to manage on a day-to-day basis, in larger time chunks, we're looking at, what's changing inside the business. How do we get ahead of things that we might need to know? And again, that's really the value of the managed service partnership that we offer, is that, we are literally partnered in this success with the customer.
Yeah, I think that's instrumental and huge in deploying this and being the value added partner to the customer, the end client, and that facilities team, management team that they have in place. This is just making them more skilled and better at their job. It's truly a value add to help them. You're not replacing things at the end of the day. When it comes to job performance, you actually improve job performance and results. So let's talk a little bit now about some of the ideal customers and impact that you guys have in some of the examples here around the solution itself, and the value it also brings to any kind of sustainability initiative, wherever a person is on their journey associated with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I certainly love to talk about this slide. It's, this is our, basically our KPI slide, right? It talks about what we do and what the value we're driving to customers. But I'll start a little bit with the actual customer profiles that we generally see. And you touched on it at the beginning, but ultimately, any customer that has HVAC for heating and cooling, rooftop HVAC units, conventional units, becomes a good fit for us if they have a distributed profile of facilities. And the number itself is probably less important. Generally speaking, we're looking at 50 to 100 stores or more as kind of the sweet spot of where the value starts to really take hold for the customer. But as long as that location is heated or cooled by rooftop units, we can put our controls in and have an immediate impact on their energy consumption and ultimately, financial and, sustainability savings. Again, if we look at the slide here, across our portfolio, we're at about 16% reduction in kilowatt hour usage on average, which, again, that number alone is obviously very, very impactful. The big question, I think, for anyone who's evaluating EMS is, what does this look like from an ROI standpoint, right? If I'm going to go try to get capital for this particular initiative, how do I do that? And, I think the numbers here speak for themselves, right? Our average payback period is less than a year and a half. It's actually less than a year in many cases, depending upon
Wow,
the type
less than
of
a year.
facility. Yeah, it's all dependent upon the equipment that's being put in and, how
Yeah, and the
often those sites are
profile
being
and
run.
yeah.
Exactly. But the idea is, what we are trying to provide to the customer base is, profitability and, cash flow over a period of time, right? If we look at the average 5-year ROI, over 280%, almost 300% investment. I mean, that's very, very strong, which is great, right? I think these are the numbers that, if you're on the finance side of the business, this is what's going to, be meaningful and impactful to you. But one of the other things that gets us really excited and, ultimately out of bed every single day, I think in many cases, is this concept that what we're doing not only provides, a financial incentive for customers, but we're literally, quite literally saving the planet while we're doing it, right? It's, there are very, very trackable data metrics around how much kilowatt hour reduction can do for greenhouse gas emissions, what that means in terms of, reduced deforestation. There's a lot of, sustainability and environmental benefit here that comes from doing this. And, again, I'm probably getting, a little bit geeky about this, but the reality is the ability to go and put in something that helps a business operate more profitably and also save the planet. There's few businesses in the world that are doing things like this, and we're very, very proud of it.
Yeah, and I for me personally, my background before getting into consulting was finance and operations, bean counter, have you will. So, I was always number driven when I was in these different executive meetings and management meetings, because that was my focus point. And I think that with this solution, what makes it so exciting for us and aligns with our mission and value statement to assist customers is that it's not a this or that or an either or scenario. You truly can improve your operations, lower costs at the end of the day, and have ROI numbers, as you see on this slide, that if it was any other project, you would be like, okay, let's do this, right? And I like to say the icing on the cake and everything, and you get to eat it too, is that you're doing something good at the end of the day by reducing emissions, taking load off of the grid itself, right? So you're having an impact, and it's just a byproduct of a good business and financial decision at the end of the day. So I've run into scenarios where the mindset or the stigma is, oh man, I'm going to be just spending a lot more money to be able to do this. It doesn't make sense. And that's not necessarily true in a lot of cases. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I guess that kind of touches on the next thing I'd like to talk about before we close. And I know this goes by so fast, that I think I need to change the name of the grind to something else, because I could need a whole pot of coffee with folks like yourself and getting into this stuff, because it just continues to lead to different things. But we touched on a few things, and I think not only this is a good value operationally, financially, but there is a cost of inaction. Can you speak a little bit around the cost of inaction, or just highlight those again from an EMS perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, I think when we think about inaction, there's, really three lanes that are affected or impacted. The first is, I don't want to say most importantly, but maybe most importantly to some, is financially, right? I mean, you can see here on the numbers, if we're reducing your kilowatt hour consumption by 16% on average per month, there is a direct financial correlation to that. And every month or day or week that you do not have a solution like this in place, you are, effectively spending more on energy consumption than you need to, right? There's again, that's verifiable. It's something that we talk about a lot with our customers, especially as we look at what their rollout plans are, how they go get capital funding. But we also, then move to the next lane of sustainability, right? If you're operating inefficiently from your energy consumption standpoint, you are part of the problem, so to speak, in this case, where, you could be helping the problem of, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and helping, to benefit the planet. And that one, again, that's probably the most, important in our minds, right? When we look at cost of inaction, I think there's a third one, which, ultimately ties into, the actual operations of the business, right? If you're doing things manually instead of, remotely across a portfolio, you're spending time and money on human capital to go do things that, don't have anything to do with your energy consumption savings or sustainability necessarily, but they do affect how you operate as a business. And so if we can put in, a solution that helps you, do all these things, to reduce consumption and save the planet, but also help you operate more efficiently, you can repurpose people, you can, help, make your human capital go further. And you can also extend asset life. There's things that our solution does that help you better manage your maintenance spend, which again, we didn't have a ton of time to talk about today, but ultimately the cost of inaction is the summation of all three of these categories, right? And that's how we look at it.
And that contributes to, a business continuity or a risk profile that, with your solution in place, the data, the analytics, knowing what's going on with the equipment, right? There's information there and data there that lowers risk. If equipment is breaking or going down, that's a risk to a business. Maybe they can't operate that day. Maybe even if the temperatures are not kept at a certain threshold, maybe that causes spoilage and damage and, use a restaurant case, food poisoning into somebody, right? So there's an entire, set of risk factors that this helps to prevent or mitigate at the end of the day, which is your third point on there with eliminate risk. So I just wanted to touch on that briefly from our perspective. And then with that said, believe it or not, we're coming up on 30 minutes. So I want to be able to close out here on the call by thanking you for taking the time out of your busy day to, walk through, an EMS solution, what it entails, right? What it means, and the value that it actually brings to so many different industries and clients across the U.S. here. So thank you, for taking this time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I mean, again, I could talk about this all day. There's a lot to it, but glad that we can share this time.
Yeah, agreed. And so for our listeners out there, you see this, it was designed to be a high level business conversation. Hopefully you took away something from it that is useful. And if you want to explore and go deeper, you can see my contact information is on the screen there right now. And there's also a link to my calendar that's listed as well. And just go in there, put that in your browser, and you can pick a time to schedule a follow-up, and we can go deeper into the EMS solution with InTouch. And we can also start talking about the other components, and this is where the partnership is so valuable between Cerestel and InTouch, is the other supporting components that go along in making this successful. At Cerestel, we can help you with those things as well, connectivity, um, cloud storage, whatever it may be at the end of the day to help your business. So thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode of The Grind. Have a great day.